Part 16. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 151. Guyu naturally noticed his expression and couldn't help but look in his direction. At this glance, he saw something unbelievable. This is, Guyu's pupils shrank slightly, his mouth was half opened, and he looked shocked. What Guyu saw was the sky-breaking sword and the other Emperor rank spirit weapons beside him, as well as the terrifying aura emanating from the entire sword tomb. Especially the aura emanating from the sky-breaking sword made him look intimidated. My mind started to panic at this moment. This was the first time Guyu felt like this. I couldn't help but exclaimed, "Is this the sword tomb spread throughout the profound heaven continent? And the sword in the middle should be the sky-breaking sword of the great emperor." Then he praised, "It really lives up to its false reputation. The aura exuding from itself is so powerful, I'm afraid even a high-level martial emperor might feel frightened here," Guyu murmured. What Guyu said was not wrong. Thousands of years ago, the proud man from Tiangong also visited this place. When Guyo saw this scene, his expression was the same as Guyu's now, but his expression was calmer than Guyu's. He was just shocked and praised a few words casually. I bragged to the then sword pavilion owner and left. The aura emitted by this thing is probably incomparable to even the half-immortal weapon, and may even be much greater than it, Guyu pondered. Then he couldn't help but laugh at himself. It seems that we are too confident this time. The strength of this sword pavilion is definitely not that weak. It should hide a powerful trump card. Guyu looked at Fang Ming. Seeing this, Fang Ming showed a trace of hesitation and asked, "Then should we still take action against it now?" Guyu shook his head, "Now is not the time. We have to re-examine the strength of sword pavilion now, otherwise we may suffer a big loss. Let's find out the details of sword pavilion first, and then ask the old man carefully. He should also know something, and then you can do something about it after you know the details." Fang Ming nodded heavily, understanding the importance of this matter, and then his figure disappeared into thin air. After Fang Ming left, Guyu frowned and looked through the layers of white clouds with a pair of deep eyes into the square of Sword Pavilion. Sword Pavilion. Many disciples wearing Sword Pavilion robes are divided into 5 rows, with their eyes closed and their legs crossed, sitting here quietly practicing. Every practice, thousands of sword intents will appear here with great momentum, just like a real swordsman dancing his sword and casting spells here. In the Sword Pavilion, this is a normal thing. Whenever the disciples are free, they will all gather together and talk to each other about their experiences in cultivation, sword intent, etc. I saw the young man walking towards here with firm eyes, looking at the disciples coming and going around him. The young man clenched his fists, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He glanced at everyone, without any embarrassment or fear, and said loudly, He is Musilian, a direct disciple of Shui Ruyu, one of the 3 immortals of Sword Pavilion. Today I will tell you that I want to challenge Shen Menjiao, a direct disciple of the Master of Sword Pavilion. If anyone knows where he is now, please tell me." Musilian bowed heavily to everyone. "I would like to thank you all in advance." Everyone opened their eyes, and at first they heard these words with a hint of ridicule and contempt, until they heard that it was Shui Ruyu's direct disciple. A smile immediately appeared on their faces, and their expressions began to become respectful and attentive. But they were all ignored by Musilian with indifference. When a man holding a feather fan saw this scene, he thought for a while and said, "Senior brother Mu challenging the pavilion master's direct disciple is an exciting event, but senior brother is a little unhappy." The man sighed. Hearing these words, Musa turned to look at him and asked in confusion, "Junior brother, can you give me more details? Is senior brother Shen not here, or something happened?" When the man saw Musa asking himself, his expression showed a hint of happiness, but he hid it very well. Then his face showed a hint of helplessness, and he nodded, "Yes, Senior brother Shen was let out by Elder Yu and others a few days ago. I heard that he was going to find something important. It has been 7 days since then. He hasn't come back either. If senior brother Ruoma wants to challenge him, he may have to wait for a few days. When Musilian heard this, his expression was slightly dazed for a moment, and then his face showed a hint of helplessness and sadness. He looked at the sky with dull eyes and murmured, "Do I really want to go out to practice and look for opportunities to break through?" This idea was rejected by him as soon as it came up, and he sighed, "But senior brother Shen doesn't know when he will come back, and I can't break through the bottleneck period. What should I do?" "Alas," Captain Musa sighed, "it's only God who's stopping me." When the disciple saw that Musilian did not reply to his words, instead he showed sadness and helplessness from time to time. There was a slight doubt, and after struggling for a while, he carefully shouted, "Senior brother Mu, senior brother Mu." Hearing someone calling him, Musa came back to his senses and turned to look at him. Until he wanted to say something, he said coldly, "Just treat what I just said as if I didn't say it. Please tell me when senior brother Shen comes back." Without waiting for the man to reply, Musilian held his sword, turned into a wisp of breeze, and left here. This practice made the disciple who had just raised his hand not know how to put it down, and others began to secretly laugh when they saw this scene. The ridicule was continuously passed into his ears, and his face showed a hint of embarrassment. Then, regardless of everyone's comments, he shook his feather fan lightly and flew towards his residence with his sword. As he walked on the road, he looked slightly disappointed, and he didn't even hear a disciple next to him call him senior brother. Originally, he wanted to take this opportunity to please Musilian, but in the end, Musa didn't even give him a chance. He just asked him to let him know when Shen Menjiao came back. He sighed, shook his head in frustration, and then cheered up. He knew that he didn't have no chance at all. "Say it." On the top of a gorgeously decorated attic, a cold woman with a beautiful face and icy muscles stood there. The breeze blew through her robe, revealing her snow-white and slender jade legs. "This person is like a fish in water." She saw what had happened just now and murmured, "It seems Lianer is unlucky. It seems he will have to wait until next time. But speaking of which, why didn't I know about Shen Menji's going out? Even the pavilion master didn't tell me." Shui Ruyu's face revealed a trace of doubt and confusion. As one of the 3 immortals of Sword Pavilion, she is qualified to know everything in Dao Sect, including this matter. Before she could continue to think about it, a voice with a sense of vicissitudes of life came into her mind. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 152. Come to the main hall. Shui Ruyu's complexion changed, his expression showed a trace of respect, and his body turned into a trace of bubbles and disappeared. Sword Pavilion. I saw an old man wearing a snow-white robe, with white beard and hair, and a vicissitudes of life standing there with his hands behind his back. The aura emitted by himself spread out like a majestic sword intent, and he cut holes in the nearby void. At this time, Shui Ryu had already arrived at the main hall. Looking at the old man's back, he bowed his head and said, "Pavilion Master, what do you want to tell me when you called Ryu here?" The vicissitudes of life old man turned around, a pair of cloudy eyes flashed with a glimmer of light, as if he had seen through the future. "Have you heard about the recent commotion between the Soul Palace and the Shadow Palace in the Central Territory?" Shui Ryu nodded, "I've heard about it. Could something happen?" The old man nodded, "Yes, my disciple Shen Menju was attacked by the Soul Palace and the Shadow Palace in the Tianya Valley. All the accompanying elders and disciples died. He was the only one who stayed at the bottom of the valley. If I hadn't been in his body he left behind my breath, otherwise no one would know everything about his current situation." "So?" The old man glanced at him. "My status is not suitable for this trip, and other elders have to deal with many important matters in the cabinet and do not have time, so I can only trouble you to rescue my apprentice." Shuiruyu frowned and did not immediately agree to this matter. Instead, he asked, "Are the Soul Palace and Shadow Palace so arrogant? Aren't they afraid of causing public anger and being attacked by those forces?" The old man shook his head. "Those crusade forces have long been secretly controlled by the Soul Palace and the Shadow Palace. Who dares to go to crusade? No one dares to take the lead. Those who come forward have been killed by them long ago, and even more besides, we don't know the specific locations of the Soul Palace and Shadow Palace, so where can we go to defeat them?" The old man sighed slightly, with a hint of sadness on his face. "I also feel that a sense of crisis is coming. That feeling tells me that my sword pavilion will face the catastrophe of annihilation of the section if I break through this time. My sword pavilion will definitely soar into the sky, but if you don't break through, it will turn into ruins and disappear from this world. It is precisely because I felt this aura that I asked you to go. After all, you are not the culprit at this time." Shuiruyu lowered his head, his eyes slightly lost in thought when he heard what the old man said, and he began to hesitate. He doesn't even have 100% ability to deal with the powerful men in the Soul Palace and Shadow Palace. Going to Tianya Valley this time is probably a narrow escape. After pondering for a moment, he looked at the old man and nodded. "I understand, leave it to me to save your apprentice." "Good." The old man nodded. Then a golden light flew from the old man's body into Shuiruyu's eyes. Seeing Shuiruyu's confused expression, the old man explained, "This thing is Hongyun, it can save your life in your critical moment. But I want to remind you, you must not use it before you meet the powerful martial emperor," the old man said with a serious expression. Upon hearing this, Shuiruyu carefully put it away, then bent down and backed away. After Shuiruyu left, the old man looked at the distance of the hall, his cloudy eyes became a little lonely, shook his head and sighed, "What an eventful year it has been." Finished. Tianya Valley. The fog here is dense, and everywhere is filled with pungent poisonous gas. Anyone below the martial sovereign will die if he smells even a trace. From time to time, there are terrifying monsters walking inside, and without exception, the auras they exude are martial venerable or above, including semi-saints. And under the thick fog, dozens of corpses were lying on the ground. Each corpse had become rotten. The smell of corpses and blood spread throughout the valley. This group of monsters were attracted by the smell of corpses and blood. Ta-ta-ta. A sound of footsteps emitting a terrifying magic sound resounded throughout the valley. Every monster who heard the footsteps covered their heads, their faces showed pain, and their eyes were bloodshot. As if he was suffering from some huge pain. Until he let out a strange scream and fell to the ground dead. I saw the owner of the footsteps appearing in the thick fog. His face was cold, but his eyes had a hint of evil charm. It seemed that no matter what he encountered, his expression would always be like this. Wearing a black dark gold robe, it is covered with various strange patterns. If you look carefully, you will be fascinated by the mystery, until you become a puppet. Looking at the dead monster nearby, the man's eyes flickered slightly and he murmured, "Where did that kid go? I've been looking here for a whole day without finding it. I originally wanted to go fishing to see if he would show up because of this. As a result, these beasts came out after a few hours." The evil man couldn't help but sigh. Click, 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 click. A crack in space appeared in front of him, and a man in a black robe walked out of it. The black robe had a big word "soul" written on it, which also represented his identity. The man in black robe immediately knelt down on one knee when he saw the evil man. He raised his hands respectfully and said, "Dragon Protector Tianmei, my subordinates have led people to search the entire valley. I even found some small holes. I checked carefully, but in the end no trace of that person was found." Seeing this, The evil man nodded and was not angry at all. He glanced sideways at him and waved his hand. I know this, please step back. Yes, the man in black robe paused and retreated with his hands. After the man in black robe left, a sneer appeared on the face of the evil man, and he said calmly, this kid is really good at hiding. I won't be able to find you for several days. Then he clenched his palms and snorted coldly, but how long can you hide? People who are targeted by my soul palace, no matter where you are, you can escape from our hands. The evil and charming man was jealous. With a smile, his body turned into black mist and disappeared here. The scene changes. Down in the valley. The black fog here is lingering, like a silent night. From time to time, there will be sounds of dripping water all around, but the sound of water here is like ghostly footsteps, enough to make others panic. And in the center of the ground, a dark lake flows quietly. Hua hua hua. Next to the lake, a man's figure was lying there. His face was pale in pain, and his body was covered with wounds. The blood had not stopped flowing out until now. The original white robe was dripping with blood, and there were dried blood stains everywhere on the ground. After a full quarter of an hour, the man stood up unsteadily, touched his dizzy head, and looked around with a pair of dark eyes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 153. Where is this place? Why am I here? Shenmenju looked confused, then touched the wound on his body. Ah! As soon as you touch it, you will feel a pain that goes deep into your bone marrow. This pain made him frown and his face began to become distorted. After half a stick of incense, the pain gradually disappeared, but that was just the beginning of the pain. Then bits and pieces of memories began to appear in his mind. Then Shenmenju's expression showed a hint of sadness and self-blame. The heartbreaking feeling burst out of her stomach. Shenmenju clenched her fists, knelt down, beat the ground hard, and started to cry loudly. You must know that he is the direct disciple of the master of the sword pavilion. He has experienced many assassinations and pains but has never cried. Instead, he is crying here. This shows how painful Shenmenju's heart is this time. Ouch, ah, ah. The mournful cries spread throughout the cave, causing echoes one after another. His eyes shed tears drop by drop, and the tears fell across his cheeks and fell to the ground, making bursts of tapping sounds in this silent cave. Uncle Yun, Elder Fengmenju is sorry for you, it was me who harmed you. If I hadn't insisted on coming here to look for that flower, how could you have died like this? I was the one who harmed you, everything, it's all my fault, my fault. The man cried out in grief. His voice became hoarse until the end of his crying, but the crying still didn't stop. After crying to the end, it seemed that I was tired of crying, and the grief-stricken heart was over. Shenmenju slumped on the ground with lifeless eyes, quietly watching the river flowing in front of her. The fish are playing in the water and splashing in the stream. Yor looked at him with a pair of big, smart eyes, as if she didn't understand why he was sitting on the ground like this. Started blowing bubbles in front of him. Shenmenju saw all this, but his expression never changed. Several breaths of time passed slowly. Shenmenju seemed to have figured out something, and her eyes slowly returned to their previous determination. He clenched his fists and said, yes, all of this was done by those men in black robes. They killed Uncle Yun and Elder Feng. I want to take revenge. I want to cultivate to become an emperor and kill them all, crushing their bones and raising their ashes. They died to pay homage to the dead elders and disciples. At the end of the sentence he burst out laughing. The sound of wild laughter scared away the fish in the water, and they disappeared in a flash. But Shenmenju didn't pay attention to this scene. He stood up, his eyes revealed a trace of determination, and the desire for revenge had already planted a deep seed in his heart. I believe that the seeds will eventually sprout and grow into towering trees. Shen Menju calmed down, glanced around, and quietly recalled why he was here. After a while, Shen Menjiu started to blame herself again. I didn't expect that it was Uncle Yun and Elder Feng who overcame all opinions and worked together with many elders to send me here. Why should I do this dash? Shen Menju let out a long sigh. They can obviously run away on their own, but they insist on protecting me, a burden, and it's really me who caused it. Shen Menjiu showed a hint of self-blame, and the heartache flowed out again. But this feeling only lasted for a breath and then disappeared. If you don't believe it, I'm going to escape from here. I'm going back to the sword pavilion and tell my master this. Let him and my uncle take revenge on these black-robed men and make them pay a heavy price. Shen Menju spoke firmly, then stood up and walked towards the end of the river. After walking for almost half a stick of incense, we came to a waterfall. I saw light blue water flowing down from a high place, making a slight splash. Under the waterfall is a pool only 3 meters wide. The left and right sides of the waterfall are covered with dark flowers, and they are full of dark flowers. The flowers are beautiful, dancing here like graceful beauties. Shen Menju looked at these strange flowers, her brows furrowed, her steps moved, and she came closer. I picked a petal at random, put it in front of my nose and smelled it. Shen Menju's expression changed. It was a very attractive fragrance, but after smelling it for a long time, she found that her heart was directly confused by the fragrance. She quickly bit the base of her tongue and woke up. That's right, it's the worry-free flower I'm looking for. Shen Menjiu looked happy. He quickly walked to the other flowers and checked them one by one. In order to prevent himself from being confused by the worry-free flowers, he used his skills to suppress them. Then he carefully took out a luminous round ball from the space ring. This round ball is a place dedicated to cultivating medicinal herbs. This item is very precious, almost as valuable as the saint rank spirit weapon. But for him, a direct disciple of the sword pavilion master, this kind of thing is nothing. He still has many rings. In addition to practicing swordsmanship, Shen Menju also has a hobby that is cultivating flowers and plants. Then Shen Menjiu carefully went to pick the worry-free flowers, and carefully transplanted them in with great energy. His expression was fully focused. It took a full 2 hours to pick all the worry-free flowers at the waterfall. After picking, Shen Menju found a boulder to sit down, looked up at the worry-free flowers in the round group, and couldn't help but smile. But I thought about what happened not long ago, and sighed slightly. I looked at my body and found that it was full of wounds, even internal injuries. He quickly took out a pill, swallowed it, and slowly recovered from his injuries while crossing his legs on the boulder. His injury was too serious, and if he didn't take care of it, it might affect his qualifications. He also wanted to avenge the elders, so he couldn't let his qualifications be ruined here. After a few breaths, Shen Menju opened her eyes and carefully checked her injuries. She found that she had almost recovered. She couldn't help but think of her previous self, showing a trace of fear. Fortunately, he recovered in time, otherwise he would have left hidden wounds in his body. Then he threw away his previous thoughts, stood up and moved his body. His eyes flickered slightly, he clenched his fists and nodded. The injury has fully recovered, it shouldn't affect anything anymore. Shen Menju smiled. Then he raised his eyes and looked around. He only saw the waterfall when he came here, and didn't look anywhere else. Not far away, dozens of towering trees stood on the ground. A glimmering green light appeared on the surface of the trees. This light was very conspicuous in this dark underground. But Shen Menju didn't notice this scene, but paid attention to the appearance of the tree. How to say? The appearance of this tree is so weird that it would not be an exaggeration to say that it is extremely ugly. This is the first time Shen Menjiu has seen a tree that grows like this. Seeing this, Shen Menju touched his chin and pondered for a moment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 154. Shen Menju himself didn't even know how to express the appearance of the tree. But he still endured his inner disgust and stepped forward. This is a great move. This is, Shen Menju was so surprised that she was speechless. This should be the legendary Hui Shen tree. It is rumored that as long as you stay under the Hui Shen tree and practice, your soul power and perception will be greatly improved, and it will even be effective against the strong martial emperor. I didn't expect that I would be killed today. I encountered it. Shen Menju's eyes shone brightly, as if he had seen a rare treasure. Then he couldn't help but sigh, maybe God is also helping me. Then, Shen Menju walked to the bottom of the tree, touched the skin of the tree with his hands, and felt the spiritual power flowing in it. He couldn't help but make a happy sound, and his mood gradually relaxed. All the fatigue in the whole body disappeared at this moment. After a while, Shen Menju stopped enjoying it, looked at the tree and exclaimed, how could he still think it was ugly? It's like durian being smelly but delicious. As expected of the returning God tree, just a touch has benefited me a lot. If I bring this tree back to the sect, I believe that the sect's combat power will be greatly improved, and I no longer have to worry about being threatened by other forces. After saying that, Shen Menju did what he said. He took out his sword and pointed it at the tree to loosen the soil. He carefully pulled out the roots one by one. He had to be careful. If he accidentally damaged the roots, then half of the tree will be destroyed, and its previous function will no longer exist. The roots of the tree are the source of life it absorbs. If it is destroyed, the nutrients in it will slowly be lost until it becomes a dead tree. So in order to deal with this tree of rejuvenation, Shen Menju spent nearly 3 hours putting it into the circle. Looking at the vibrant Huishan tree, a smile appeared on Shen Menju's lips, and he even wanted to laugh loudly. If he wasn't afraid of attracting some monsters, he would have danced with a sword. Shen Menju is as happy now as if you married the girl you love all your life. Suppressing the happiness in his heart, he glanced around and said secretly, I can't be proud and complacent now. I have to hide it well. After all, I don't rule out whether this is a dream or a trap. I believe that with this tree, my strength will increase rapidly, and my revenge will be quick. Having said this, Shen Menju looked at the other Huishan trees again, suppressed his inner excitement, and began his hard work. It took him a full day to put all the Huishan trees into the round ball. But at this moment, there was a vibration in the ground. The sound was deafening, like lava erupting. The gravel fell slowly from a high place. A terrifying aura also emitted at this moment. At this time, Shen Menju was still cultivating with the help of the Huishan tree to prepare to break through the Wuzong. But the aura emanating from it made him instantly alert. He quickly stopped practicing and looked around with a frown. He murmured, what's going on? This aura is so powerful. Could it be that there are some powerful monsters in the ground? If that's the case, then my current situation is even worse. My current strength is only at the peak of martial sovereign. I am no match for this aura master. His aura is at least above semi-saint. Even so, Shen Menju still did not choose to escape, but walked carefully towards the place where the aura was emanating. As the saying goes, the greater the crisis, the greater the harvest. And Shen Menju went with this mentality. Half an hour later, Shen Menju came to a cave filled with dead silence. I saw bones everywhere, and the scene was so grand that it was truly breathtaking and dumbfounding. And right in front, a huge stone covered with strange patterns stands here, emitting an aura like a demon in the hell of hell. Seeing this situation, Shen Menju frowned. The aura before was emanating from the boulder. But he showed a trace of hesitation, wondering whether he should move forward. Just when Shen Menju was hesitating, the boulder emitted a heart-stopping and terrifying aura. If the previous breath only made people look frightened, then this breath will make you fall straight into hell, and you will not be able to find a trace of light in the darkness, with a terrifying sense of sight. Shen Menjiao was immediately stunned by him, and she was stunned and at a loss. When he reacted, the breath had already found traces of Shen Menjiao. Shen Menjiao had already found a boulder and hid, and there was a hint of panic on his face. That breath turned into a demonic mist figure and slowly flew towards Shen Menjiao. A voice full of divine aura came into his ears. "You are human." Shen Menjiao's heart trembled when she heard the voice, and her expression changed from panic to vigilance. His sword appeared in his hand, and his martial sovereign aura was released directly at this moment, as if facing a powerful enemy. But there was such disdain in Haimu's eyes, and martial sovereign's aura was instantly lost like a cat encountering a tiger. Heiwu did not directly mock Shen Menjiao, and his voice was not so hoarse and scary, but rather soft. "Don't be afraid, kid, I won't do anything to you. If I wanted to kill you, you would be lying on the ground like these bones right now." When Shen Menjiao heard this, he felt as if he had also put away his breath, but the sword still remained in his hand. He will never leave his life or death in the hands of others. No matter how strong the person he faces is, if he doesn't fight hard, the result may be changed. Seeing this scene, Heiwu chuckled slightly. "Your kid's alertness is quite good, but it's a pity that your strength is too weak. Only when your strength is equal to your alertness can you have the right to speak to the stronger ones." Shen Menjiao frowned, with a trace of confusion on his face, not understanding what he meant by this. He felt like this person was teaching him like a senior. Looking at Shen Menjiao's puzzled face, Heiwu said directly, "Boy, do you want to gain power? I see hatred and revenge in your heart. As long as you nod, I can give you this destiny and let you change from one a weak person instantly becomes a top-notch strong person." "How is it?" Heiwu laughed. As soon as Shen Menjiao heard these words, she immediately stepped back. The sword intent is wandering all over the body like the rolling Yangtze River. He felt that this voice had been tempting him. If he hadn't been baptized by the Huishan tree, he would have been almost controlled by this voice. Such a sentence could not help but emerge in my heart. It's really a beast with a human face. He snorted coldly and said, "Your power has to pay a price, and what I need is the kind of power that belongs to me, rather than getting someone like you. No matter how strong the power is, so what?" Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 155. Heiwu looked a little surprised. This was the first time he met such a person who was not confused by power, but this kind of person is also the easiest to be confused. If he is not fooled by money and power, he must have feelings in his heart, and Black Mist only needs to take advantage of this to firmly control him. His expression quickly hid, and he looked straight at Shen Menjiao, playfully asking, "Really? Don't you want to avenge those people? Avenge your senior brothers, elders, and the others? Or do you want to be an ungrateful person, people?" Shen Menjiao glanced at him coldly, with an unmoved expression. He knew that this person was trying to provoke him. But Heiwu actually didn't care and continued, "You want to know how long it will take to become a strong martial emperor with your current talent? Thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, or can you still take revenge at that time? You must know that time can destroy everything and change everything. Even the true God cannot stop it. Perhaps they are no longer here by then? What will you do then?" Hearing this, Shen Menjiao's face froze, and she was slightly panicked, but she still endured it, showing a trace of hesitation. What this person said is not wrong. With his talent, it will take at least tens of thousands of years or even longer to become a martial emperor. But what will happen by then? Will those black-robed men still exist on Profound Heaven continent? The questions in my mind began to emerge one after another. Heiwu saw Shen Menjiao's hesitant expression but smiled gloomily, Knowing that it was done, his eyes flickered slightly, and a black light spot appeared in the palm of his hand. This thing is called a ghost. As long as anyone is contaminated with it, all the desires and thoughts in his heart will burst out without reservation. Looking at the thing in his hand, Heiwu's dark eyes looked at Shen Menjiu and threw it between his eyebrows. With a whoosh, the ghost entered directly between Shen Menjiu's eyebrows. Within a few breaths, his expression changed from hesitant to self-blaming and sad. The next moment, he was heartbroken. Scenes appeared in his mind. Shen Menjiu looked dazed and looked up at the sky in a daze. That was the scene of his closest elder and his senior brothers being killed by those men in black robes. Ah! 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 An old figure covered in blood leaned against his ear and whispered softly, "Menjiu, that's all I can help you. You can only rely on yourself in the future." Before he finished speaking, a black ghost blade pierced his chest. He fell down with a look of reluctance on his face and fell heavily to the ground. Boom! Yun, Uncle Yun, no. Menjiu couldn't bear it any longer. Tears rolled down her cheeks and fell to the ground. I started crying uncontrollably. AHH. Ah! Uncle Yun, Elder Feng, it was me who harmed you. How could you have become like this if it weren't for me? I want to avenge you. As soon as these words came out, Shen Menjiu stopped crying and became determined. She wiped away all the tears in the corners of her eyes. The hatred in her heart showed up again. This time it was more lustful than before. He clenched his fists and sharpened his fists. His nails pierced into his own flesh and blood, and the blood flowed from his flesh and blood to the ground like water, but he did not show pain, but an expression of hatred. Afterwards, Shen Menjiu's face gradually turned cold, and she looked at Heiwu and nodded in agreement. Okay, I want to get this power, I want to avenge them, I want to cut those black-robed men into thousands of pieces, and let them fall forever. Yama, let them taste the feeling of life being worse than death and never be reincarnated again. Ha ha ha. Hearing these words, Heiwu laughed heartily, but his laughter was so terrifying, as if the devil in hell was roaring. One can imagine how happy and excited he is now. His purpose has been achieved. After finishing speaking, Heiwu's dark eyes looked at Shen Menjiu and said in a low voice, "Okay, come and accept it and enjoy the pleasure brought by power." The next moment, black spiritual power appeared in the boulder, and then turned into a trace of law power and flew into Shen Menjiu's eyebrows. Wow! Ah! Shen Menjiu let out a loud shout. I saw his body floating in mid-air, his own black mist constantly covering his whole body, and traces of purple thunder and lightning flashing in it. His face was ferocious, and veins were popping up on his neck. It was not difficult to see that he was suffering great pain. Looking at the scene in front of him, Heiwu explained aloud, "Don't worry about accepting this power. The pain is only temporary, but the pleasure after gaining the power is something you will never enjoy in your life." Shen Menjiu didn't speak, and all the skills in his body kept running. The power in the Danshan is suppressing each other with his own spiritual power, as if he is determining who is the owner of this body. Unfortunately, how can it fight against the power of law? Strength is the ticket to the world. After less than a breath, he was swallowed up by the power of the law, and then spread out to the limbs of Shen Menjiu's body. This was the power of the law transforming his body, otherwise he would not be able to withstand this power with his current strength. The transformation process was very long, and it took half a day to complete. A pair of scarlet eyes covered with bloodshot eyes opened, and the black eyes were beating constantly. From a distance, they looked like a black hole. Just one look at it will send shivers down your spine and make you tremble with fear. He is the reformed Shen Menjiu. A strange pattern appeared between his eyebrows, as if it was his third eye. The dark purple light emitting from the pattern adds a sense of mystery and confusion to it. And there are 200-meter wings on his back, with dark golden lines emerging from them, making it look like two sharp blades are inserted into his back. Shenmenju's complexion also gradually changed, becoming cold, and there was no trace of emotion in his eyes. The clothes that were originally stained with blood also gathered on his body at this moment, and blood-colored meridians appeared on his arms, chest, and limbs. The robe also turned into a long blood-red robe, which was tightly covered from head to foot, adding a sense of weirdness. Only a pair of blood-red eyes were left exposed. Shenmenju looked at his hands, twisted his neck and clenched his fists, and said with satisfaction, "What a powerful force, worthy of being in the martial emperor realm world. The gap between it and martial sovereign is as big as the earth and the sky." A hint of golden light appeared in his eyes, and he laughed arrogantly. "At this moment, I am afraid that I can punch through the mountains and rivers and shatter the continent." "Ha ha ha, it should be more than that. It is not a problem to step through the entire void and destroy the martial emperor, even the one from the heavenly palace." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 156. A celestial immortal-like woman appeared in Shenmenju's mind. Her expression was serious with a hint of contempt for the world. This look makes people want to conquer. Shenmenju grinned, put aside the reveries in his mind, looked at the black mist and said, "What's the price? Tell me." The cold tone does not contain the slightest hint of rejection. Because of this strength, Shenmenju has a sense of confidence to dominate the world. Even the master who gave him this power dared to show his face directly. But the Black Shadow didn't care. What he wanted was this unscrupulous voice, and he replied indifferently, "The price is that you will have no heart from now on. Your heart has changed from red to black. From now on, no matter what emotions you encounter in the future, you will not be moved, family affection, love, you will not have the slightest interest." Hearing this, Shenmenju waved his hands indifferently and said, "Emotions are just a burden to me. Strength is what I pursue in this life. This price is nothing." Hiwa nodded and said, "There is another price." Shenmenju frowned. "The fact that you have obtained this power also means that from now on, you are a member of my demon palace." Shenmenju's gloomy face raised, showing a hint of interest, and asked, "Demon palace? Is the power you belong to called the demon palace?" Hiwa nodded and replied without changing his expression, "Yes, the power I am in is the upper realm, which is what you call the land of immortality. The reason why I am in this desolate continent is because I have to do it for some reasons. Fell from the upper realm to the lower realm." Shenmenju's stern face showed doubts, and he didn't understand the meaning of the sentence. But Hiwa did not pay attention to his doubts and continued, "And you are the first person I accepted in the lower realm, so you are also considered as half of my disciples. Even if you reach the upper realm in the future, you can go to the demon palace. Just tell me my name when the time comes, and the people in the demon palace will not embarrass you, and will even entertain you." Shenmenju raised his brows and said in a deep voice, "It seems that your background is very powerful, but what makes me curious is how powerful a person can be to knock you into the lower world." Hiwa glanced at him and said coldly, "With your current strength, knowing this will not do any good. Wait until you reach the semi-immortal realm before asking this question." Finished. The black mist turned into a wisp of black smoke and returned to the boulder. No matter how Shenmenju screamed, she had no intention of making any sound. Seeing this, Shenmenju didn't bother to look for trouble, and her body turned into a trace of black gas and disappeared from the place. Over the valley. The sword intent that stepped on the shattering void appeared here, and a terrifying aura rushed into the sky. A hole was opened in the nearby void, and a woman with a beautiful face walked out of it. This person was ordered by the master of the sword pavilion to find Shenmenju Shuiryu. I saw him stepping barefoot in the air, a pair of snow-white slender jade feet exposed, and his bright eyes looking around. Mountain peaks reaching into the clouds appeared in her eyes. Many mountain peaks are hovering over the earth like giant dragons. Green trees and towering trees. And Tianya Valley is firmly surrounded by many peaks. Shui Ruyu frowned slightly, looked at the valley below, and murmured, "The smell of blood is so strong, I don't know if the other elder disciples except Shen Menju survived. Although the idea of water like fish is somewhat unrealistic, it is only what she hopes for." He put away his majestic sword intent, disappeared into the air, and appeared in the valley. What she saw before her eyes was thick white fog, which could not be seen to the end. The thick fog blocked her sight. She frowned slightly, waved her hand, and the next moment a strong wind blew away all the thick fog. And the unsightly corpse also appeared in her eyes. All the corpses were piled there, and the smell of blood exuded by them made people sick. The main reason is that the way these corpses died was so mutilated that only their faces could be seen clearly, and the rest like their chests and limbs were all broken bones and flesh. Her face tightened slightly and she looked a little angry. Are those forces looking for death? But then she calmed down. Anger would only reduce her wisdom, and she couldn't get angry because of it. It seems that the thick fog just now was the method of that group of people, in order to prevent these corpses from being seen by people passing by, Shui Ruyu said thoughtfully. Then he walked forward and examined all the faces one by one. There was no surprise, these were all people she knew well, but Shen Menju was not here. It can be seen from this that he was really hidden somewhere and was not found by the group of people as the master of the sword pavilion said. It seems like what the pavilion master said is true. Shen Menju is safe now. The group of people did not find him, Shui Ruyu said secretly. Seeing that the water was like a fish, he didn't continue to look for it. He turned around and prepared to leave, but at this time, aura began to emit. I saw dozens of figures in black robes emerging from mid-air, holding dark sharp blades in their hands, which exuded bursts of chill. Their eyes were full of murderous intent, without any emotion. Numerous breaths were released without reservation, rushing towards the water like a fish. But it was of no use to Shui Ruyu. He waved his slender jade hand and all the breath shattered and scattered like ice cubes. You must be the elder of this force. I really didn't expect you to have the courage to come here even after all these people are dead. I don't know if I am praising you for being sentimental or praising you for being stupid. Shui Ruyu looks towards the person who made the sound. The man who made the noise was tall and had a ferocious face. His strong muscles were exposed in a black robe, but hidden inside was a powerful and terrifying power. Shui Ruyu frowned. If nothing else, this strong man should be an individual cultivator, and physical cultivators are the most difficult to deal with. It would be fine if his realm was low, but the aura exuded by this strong man was pointing directly to the semi-emperor realm. As for the rest of the men in black robes, she didn't care. The strength of this group of people was only at the level of semi-saint. In her eyes, this group of people were just dispensable ants. In the face of realm suppression, quantity is nothing at all. But she was also surprised by the strength of these black-robed men. A force that had just been born had so many semi-saint strong men, and this was just a branch. But her expression was still well hidden, and she said with a disdainful tone, "You dare to be so arrogant even if your strength is not greater than mine. I really don't know what the master behind you is thinking." Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 157. Really? The strong man smiled. There was a hint of mockery in his expression. With his eyes fixed on the water like fish, he looked down at her and said, "Do you really think I'm the only one?" The words have fallen. Another figure appeared in front of the strong man. This person is none other than the evil man from before. "How's it going?" "It's as you wish," the giant man joked, looking at the water like a fish. Seeing this, Shui Ryu snorted coldly and said nothing. A dazzling jade sword appeared in his hand. There are two big characters written on the sword. Misty. Seeing this scene, the strong man stared at Shui Ryu with cold eyes and said, I have heard that Sword Pavilion's ethereal sword immortal Shui Ryu is someone who can take a move from the strong martial emperor. This thing the story has spread throughout the central territory, and I want to fight with you today to see if this is true. As soon as they finished speaking, their own auras rushed out. Boom. With just a breath, the nearby mountain peaks were unable to withstand it and began to break apart. Shui Ryu didn't say a word, but gathered the power of spirit gathering, a pair of phoenix eyebrows tightly closed. The next moment, her slender jade fingers were seen crossing the sword body, and the sword body instantly emitted a bright golden light, and hidden in the golden light was the majestic sword intent. Swish! The sword intent shot straight into the sky, piercing the shattering void sky. The next moment, the fish-like eyes opened, bursts of cold light appeared, and the cold light shot straight towards the two of them. The sword intent also rotated around the body like a roulette, and then turned into several pure sword intents and rushed towards the two of them. Whizzing! The two of them looked shocked, and their whole body skills started to work quickly. Black lights appeared in front of the two of them and turned into a spiritual shield. Boom boom! The sword intent directly hit the two people's shields, making a roaring sound. The sound shook the sky and went straight into the sky. Even the many strong men in black robes watching the battle kept retreating. They didn't care about their injuries, but they flashed thousands of miles outside the valley. When they arrived at the 1,000 miles point, they slowly exhaled, and their minds gradually relaxed. With their strength, they can only be arrogant in front of that group of small forces, but in this kind of semi-emperor level fight, they can't be arrogant at all. If they are not careful, they will turn into fly ash and disappear from the world. The two people had weakened the energy in the air wave just now, otherwise just this air wave would have cost them their lives. Everyone is still very grateful to the two of them, which is also the fundamental reason why the Soul Palace and the Shadow Palace have so many people loyal to them. Seeing this scene, Shui Ryu's bright eyes lit up slightly, and a hint of surprise flashed across his expression. Since you can block my blow, you are pretty good and worthy of my taking it seriously. But that's all. Shui Ryu's face turned cold instantly, her delicate body was suspended in mid-air, and her pair of slender jade legs were exposed as the breeze blew through her dress. The sword intent rolled out like the Yangtze and Yellow rivers, constantly pouring into her whole body. The originally blue sky and white clouds suddenly became covered with dark clouds, and the lightning flashed like a catastrophe. Naturally, it also attracted Shenmenju's attention. A ferocious and terrifying body appeared in the void, blood-red eyes staring closely at this scene. And everyone had no idea that there were still people watching them in the void, and everyone looked at the scene with serious expressions. Such a powerful force, this should be a fight between half-emperors, Shenmenju murmured. There was a trace of disdain on his face, and he said arrogantly, but my strength has reached the level of martial emperor, and the strong half-emperor is nothing more than an ant to me. The words have fallen. Shenmenju directly pierced the void in front of her, penetrated directly into the clouds and reached the sky above the valley. All her breath was restrained by him. It was not that he was afraid, but that she wanted to watch the battle between several people seriously. Until he saw a familiar figure, his eyes froze with a hint of surprise on his face. Why did she appear here? I saw Shenmenju's eyes looking at Shui Ryu below. She pondered for a moment, then murmured secretly, Master should have asked her to come find me, so should I help her? Shenmenju asked herself a question. Instead of going to help immediately, because at this time he no longer has any emotions at all. If it were the previous Shenmenju, he would definitely not hesitate and stand directly in front of her to resist the attacks of the two. But now he is different. His eyes were slightly condensed, and he had no intention of going up to help. He just stood there with his arms folded and watched the three people fighting. Let me see what the three of you will fight like in the end. Finished. The water was like a fish, shining with golden light and heading straight towards the three of them, with constant roaring sounds. Boom. Debris falls from the mountain peak. But the battle between the three has not stopped yet. I saw the water like a fish throwing out dozens of cold sword intents and rushing towards the two of them. The battle between the three people spread out like a flood dragon crossing a river. Every time a move is made, the void nearby will be firmly broken, and even the original ancient capital of Tianya will be shattered as a result, with dust and smoke everywhere turning into a ruin. Even the nearby mountain peaks were not spared from turning into gravel powder everywhere. The tens of thousands of mountains collapsed and shattered. The two men looked pale, panting slightly, and looked a little downcast. They looked at each other, a little helpless. The difference between the strength of the two and Shui Ryu is still too big. They can't resist just a few moves. This is because Shui Ryu has not shown his true strength. If he had shown his true strength, they would not have any resistance at all. Force. On the other hand, Shui Ryu's expression still showed no change at all, and those few moves just now had no effect on her at all. Looking at the expressions of the two of them, he said coldly, "Have you beaten enough? Although the move is conspicuous, the damage it does to me is minimal. It must not make me wonder whether you are too weak or I am too strong. Or is it that your half-emperor realm came to you by taking drugs?" Shui Ryu said with a smile. His expression was so uncomfortable. Seeing this, the two looked at each other and understood the difference between them. "We have to bring the deputy palace master here. With our strength, we are no match for this woman. If we continue to fight hard, we will be the only ones who suffer." After hearing this, the strong man pondered for a moment and then nodded in agreement. Then, a mysterious message reached the mind of Chu Yale, who was staying in the Soul Palace. At this time, she was practicing with her legs crossed on the ground, and her beautiful face was so fascinating. Her delicate face moved slightly, she opened her charming eyes, her red lips opened slightly, and she murmured, "Have you encountered a strong enemy?" As soon as the words fell, the figure disappeared. Above the valley, Shui Ryu was a little confused as to why the two didn't fight over. Could it be that his own strength scared them? Shui Ryu frowned slightly. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 158. The next moment, a crack in the void tore open in mid-air, and a very charming woman walked out of it. She has outstanding grace and charm, and every part of her body exudes a sexy and charming atmosphere. If anyone with low strength takes one look at her, they will be burned by desire, drained of their essence and die. Looking at the woman who appeared in front of him, Shui Ryu's face started to look at her seriously as if she had encountered a powerful enemy. She felt that this person exuded the aura of the peak half-emperor. She was not panicking if he was not fighting alone. But the main thing is that there are two other half-emperors next to him, and with this woman, there are three. This also means that his current situation is very dangerous. Once the two of them find an opportunity to sneak attack on her while she is fighting against him, the situation will be dangerous. Unless you use that thing. Thinking of this, a ball of light appeared in Shui Ryu's hand, hiding a treasure that exuded a terrifying aura. It was the Hongyun that the master of Sword Pavilion gave her that day. Looking at the ball of light in her hand, Shui Ryu let out a sigh of relief. As long as she had this thing, the half-emperor would not pose a threat to her. Seeing this, Shui Ryu looked at Chu Yale in the sky with a cold expression. His own aura was exuding strongly, as if to declare, "What can even three half-emperors do?" Chu Yale just covered her mouth and smiled, not in a hurry to take action. Kinkinya crossed her chest with her hands and said softly, "Are you the Misty Sword Immortal, one of the three immortals of Sword Pavilion?" Shui Ryu nodded when he heard this. She didn't understand. She knew her name, So why did she continue to ask? Is it just to ridicule yourself? Chuyale didn't pay attention to her expression and said softly, let me tell you a news. Your sword pavilion will be destroyed soon. I think you are so talented and have the opportunity to attack the martial emperor. It's a pity to die. So you alone, if you have the opportunity, you can take refuge in my soul palace, and with my status, there is no problem in giving you a position as a protector. Shui Ruyu's eyes were stunned, and his expression was slightly startled. In order to avoid being discovered by Chuyale, he quickly hid it. She couldn't help but think of the disaster that the master of Sword Pavilion told her back then. But little did they know that all of this had been seen by Chuyale. She had been staring at Shui Ruyu's expression from the beginning. Even if Shui Ryu hid it well, she could still detect it slightly. After a while, Shui Ryu looked at Chuyale and said, what do you mean by this? How could my sword pavilion, with so many strong men, be destroyed in one fell swoop? Even if you lie to me, you have to come up with a realistic one. Is sex okay? Chuyale shook her head slightly. I'm just telling you the news. I won't tell you the details. You will know it soon. But what you have to understand is that the time I give you is not long. Even if you agree by then, I will not accept it. After listening, Shui Ryu began to fall into silence. The silence lasted for half an hour. Chuyale was also willing to wait patiently and did not act quickly. It wasn't until Shui Ryu started to show hesitation that he said, how about it? Do you want to consider it? You know that the resources of my soul palace are very rich. As long as you have the perseverance and qualifications, you can even go to the semi-immortal realm. If you successfully break through, let alone the emperor realm. Hearing this, Shui Ryu's expression turned cold. He pointed his ethereal sword towards Chuyale and said indifferently, aren't you too arrogant to say this? Isn't the semi-fairy realm just a piece of shit? If you can break through it at will, wouldn't the profound heaven continent break the sky? If you say martial emperor, I can still believe it, but if you say semi-fairyland, haha, then I will have to laugh at you. But Chuyale didn't explain. She blinked her beautiful eyes. Those beautiful eyelashes were so beautiful. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. After all, there are things in this world that you haven't seen before, and you only have one chance. Whether you agree or disagree, I don't even bother to care. As soon as the words fell, Chuyale's own aura radiated out, and dark laws emanated from the nearby void, like cold pythons. But now I have to teach you a lesson, but don't worry, I will be harsher and won't kill you. After all, you are so good looking. If you die, the new family will be very sad. Chuyale covered her mouth and smiled slightly. But it is so ironic and disgusting to Shui Ryu's ears. Immediately, the energy was exhausted, and the Piao Miao sword released a burst of murderous intent. The aura that originally enveloped him was instantly blown away. Chuyale smiled, her skirt swayed, and a pair of very charming legs flickered in and out, as if the desire in her heart would be revealed at a glance. I saw Chuyale's slender jade hands waving. The majestic winds spurted out, and the power of the dark law directly pressed against the water like a fish. After barely holding on for a breath, a trace of cold sweat broke out on Shui Ryu's forehead, and he began to pant slightly. This power of law was pressing on her chest like a huge mountain, making it impossible to breathe. Sister, this strength is not enough, Chuyale said with a slight smile. The charming laughter is so beautiful that once you hear it, you will be addicted to it and unable to extricate yourself. Shui Ryu's face was startled, showing an expression of disbelief. This is simply impossible. How can you use the power of law? This is something that can only be mastered by the martial emperor realm world. Why can you have it? Chuyale smiled charmingly, I told you, sister, that as long as you join the Soul Palace, you can see things you haven't seen before, but you don't agree. Shuiruyu frowned slightly and clenched her pink palms tightly. He knew that Chu Yale, who possessed the aura of laws, could not defeat him. Laws and spiritual power were not at the same level. Seeing this, Shuiruyu let out a long sigh and shook his head with a disappointed look. Seeing this scene, Chu Yale's bright eyes flashed slightly and said, "How about sister? Do you want to agree? If you agree, I can be your sister. Whenever you can't solve anything, you can come to my sister." Chu Yale showed a look of love, which is why she chased Shuiruyu and stalked him. She felt that Shuiruyu had a feeling in her heart that was exactly the same as hers back then. It was precisely because of this feeling that she made such an expression regardless of her face. Shuiruyu looked at her and didn't agree immediately, but said, "You take my move first." As soon as the words fell, the water is like a fish suspended in mid-air, and the misty sword in her hand blends into the center of her eyebrows. The next moment, waves of majestic spiritual energy gathered into her body, and the sky-reaching sword intent appeared from the sky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 159. The momentum is majestic, as if a catastrophe is coming. As soon as the sword intent came out, the situation changed, and the entire sky instantly turned into a field of sword energy. Dark clouds are everywhere and thunder is booming. Seeing this, Chu Yale's face changed from a playful expression to a serious one. This move means that even she must take it seriously. She has only mastered the law and has not reached the level of martial emperor. The half-emperor's attack can still affect him. Boom boom boom. Click, click, click. The water turned into a golden light like a fish and merged into his ethereal sword. The sword intent surrounding him all gathered into hundreds of spirit swords. The majestic sword intent in the sword domain slowly melted into itself. The next moment, Shuiruyu opened his smart eyes, and his own breath burst out. Boom. Then all the spirit swords rushed straight towards Chu Yale as if with eyes. It turned into a stream of light and followed closely behind. When the other two people in mid-air saw this scene, they were shocked and quickly retreated tens of thousands of miles away. They couldn't resist this move. If they were not careful, they would fall here with hatred. Looking at the moves coming towards her, Chu Yale's long hair was dancing. She had absolutely no way out now. Because the space on all four sides has been firmly sealed, and the move used by Shuiruyu is also locked, she can't escape even if she wants to. A pair of charming eyes flashed slightly. Although the move was strong, it was not completely unstoppable. Next moment, Chu Yale's body moved, and the dark law aura appeared, and a huge figure behind him flickered and appeared. It was a giant black python with strong murderous intent. It spit out the snake letter and looked at the move coming towards it without any movement. When the move was less than 1 centimeter away from it, the giant python's cold eyes moved. I saw Chu Yale in front of me turned into a wisp of gloomy black mist and merged into the body of the giant python. The next moment, the giant python was full of breath, twisted its snake body and rushed over. The two meet and collide together. Boom. Boom. As a result, the color of the world changed, the space was shattered, the void flowed, the mountain peaks were turned into ruins, and no one within 10 miles was spared. Even the men in black robes and the two guardians who were thousands of miles away felt the terrifying air waves. My heart trembled slightly. There was a trace of fear on their faces. Fortunately, the two of them had just called the deputy palace master. Otherwise, if this move had hit them, the scene would have been extremely miserable. When Shen Menju, who was on the other side, saw this scene, an interesting smile appeared on her lips. It's really a wonderful competition, but it's a pity that it's still too weak. But he shook his head and said with a dark smile, no matter how you fight, I will be the winner in the end. A martial emperor is a martial emperor after all. Say it. The dust and smoke cleared, revealing the true appearance of the two of them. The two looked at each other with their eyes moving, without saying a word. Then, Shui Ruyu put away the Piao Miao sword, and all his aura dissipated. Chu Yale smiled, her smile was so heartwarming. This battle has been decided. The winner is Chu Yale. Just when she was about to speak, there was a deadly and terrifying breath. The breath is like hell, dead and cold. A ferocious and terrifying face appeared in front of the two of them, especially the two dark golden wings behind him, which looked so domineering and arrogant behind him. This person is none other than Shen Menjiu. Seeing the puzzled expressions on their faces, Shen Menju laughed hoarsely. The fight you two just played was so comfortable, it made me feel so comfortable. Upon hearing this, the two of them were shocked and frowned. Shen Menju didn't pay attention. A pair of ferocious blood-red eyes looked at Shui Ruyu below, and said in a deep voice, "Does Ruyu Sword Immortal still recognize me?" Shui Yu looked puzzled for a while, not understanding the meaning of the sentence, until she took a closer look and found that this person was somewhat similar to Shen Menjiu, and said in surprise, Are you Shen Menjiu?" But then he shook his head, feeling that something was wrong, and whispered, "No, you should just look similar to him, it can't be him." But Shen Menju smiled, and underneath the laughter was a murderous intention. "That's me." A trace of gratitude appeared on his expression. "You still recognize me after I've become like this, which really makes me feel very happy." Shui Ruyu glanced at him, "Then why are you like this?" He. A trace of nostalgia appeared on Shen Menju's face, and she said casually, "Because I want revenge. It's because of revenge that I became like this. This is the price." Revenge. Shui Ruyu looked at the broken corpse in the distance with his phoenix eyes, seeming to understand something. He remembered that Shen Menju was a person who valued love and justice. He grew up in a place like Sword Pavilion, and the elders and disciples who accompanied him this time were all people he had played with since childhood. The elders also watched them grow up, so the relationship between them was very strong. He even compared it to his master. Shen Menju sighed slightly, with faint eyes, and said, "I got that appearance and became like this, but I feel that this is very suitable for me. To gain strong power, I have to pay an equal price. I feel pretty good, don't you think?" Shen Menju looked at Shui Ruyu with a questioning expression. Shui Ruyu was slightly startled, not knowing what to say. After a moment of burning incense, she was about to say something. She found that she could no longer move, and looked at Shen Menjiu in confusion, wondering what this meant. But Shen Menju just glanced at her coldly and had no intention of saying anything. In addition to Shui Ruyu, Chu Yale in mid-air is also like this. Her body seems to be tied up by something, and she can't break free at all. Suddenly, a violent roar reached the ears of the two of them, and Chu Yale was shocked, as if she had a bad premonition. He quickly turned his head and looked behind him, and found that all the men in black robes thousands of miles away had disappeared, with only a trace of minced meat floating in the air proving their existence just now. Only two Daoist figures escaped. He looked very embarrassed. Seeing this scene, Chu Yale looked angry, like a crazy lioness. He frowned and looked at Shen Menju and said coldly, "Do you know the consequences of offending the Soul Palace?" Hearing this, Shen Menju laughed loudly and looked at her with disdain, as if she wanted to say, "How ridiculous this sentence is. You still don't know your situation? So what if you offend the Soul Palace? Am I afraid of it? What's more, who offended whom first? Don't you know clearly?" Then he pointed his finger at the broken corpse not far away and said sternly, "These are the elders, brothers and sisters who have lived and died with me. You killed them and then beat them up and said that I offended you. Don't you think this sentence how ridiculous is that? Besides, what does your soul palace mean? Are you bullying others based on your own strength? Humph. If you have the guts, call the strong martial emperor behind you. I want to see how strong he is. I'll give you a chance. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 160. Chu Yale said nothing, and there was no look of regret or apology on her face. Because there is no absolute right or wrong in this matter, only different positions. This is the world where strength is paramount. Then, Shen Menju looked at the two people who had just escaped and recovered from their injuries. The evil man sensed the scene and immediately opened his eyes. He began to panic, and gradually realized that this man was the man who had escaped before. As if she felt something, Shen Menju turned her ape-like eyes to look at him, touched her chin, smiled, and pretended to be shocked. You are not the man who is chasing me, are you? Then he touched his head, looking a little embarrassed. I almost forgot. You should be the one who led them to kill them. Oh, look at my memory. Should I cut you into pieces? Or crush your bones and scatter them into ashes? As soon as he finished speaking, a suffocating pressure rushed towards the evil man, and he was instantly pressed to the ground from mid-air. Bang! The evil man's face was pressed against the ground. He clenched his back teeth and looked slightly painful. But there was no sound for a long time. Seeing this scene, the strong man's pupils shrank, he was a little frightened, and he patted his chest slightly. Seeing the evil man's expression, Shen Menju appeared in front of him in an instant. Without making a sound, she stepped on his chest and stepped in. Puff! The chest was broken, and pools of blood flowed from it. The scene was extremely bloody and unbearable to watch. Ah! The evil man finally couldn't bear it anymore, his face turned pale, and he screamed in pain. The aura in the whole body dropped directly to the extreme. The evil man is dying, as if he will die in the next moment. But Shen Menjiu didn't seem to have enough fun, and trampled his limbs one by one. Boom! 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 4 times in a row, all the hands and feet were shattered. The only good thing about his body is his head. Are you comfortable? Do you feel good? Shen Menju laughed, looked at the charming man and said. He spoke very gently, as if he didn't do those things just now. But the evil man didn't speak, his eyes were tightly closed, and he was biting his tongue and trying not to let himself fall asleep, because he knew that once he fell asleep, he would really fall asleep. Shen Menju didn't mean to kill him, she just stepped on his chest from time to time, as if torturing him, as if she wanted to vent all the hatred and pain in her heart on him. When Shui Ruyu saw this scene, he just sighed slightly and did not open his mouth to persuade. The only way to vent his hatred is best. Everyone has experienced hatred, but no one can understand it. Finally, after a few breaths, Shen Menjiu seemed to have had enough fun. The aura of law appeared and lifted the evil man up. His eyes were blank, without a trace of light, and there was pain on his face. Seeing the evil man's expression, Shen Menju smiled coldly. With a flash of flame, the man turned into ashes and disappeared into the world. Chu Yale finally couldn't bear it anymore and forcefully broke free from the restraints. That was a strong man she had cultivated with great difficulty. Killing him like this was like killing his son. A force of law was emitted, and then it attacked Shen Menju. But when she took action, Shen Menjiu had already noticed it, escaped the aura attack, turned into a black shadow and appeared behind her, and directly hugged Chu Yale's delicate waist. Don't be impulsive, Shen Menju approached her hair and smelled it obsessively. But Chu Yale didn't listen at all, her body kept struggling as if trying to avoid his dirty hands. This feeling only made her nauseous, but she couldn't resist, her whole body was completely controlled. Shen Menju's eyes kept looking at Chu Yale's twisting figure, with a hint of obsession and a hint of my wretchedness. It seemed like he wanted to see through her whole body. Shuiruyu looked at the scene with a confused expression, not understanding what Shen Menjiu meant by doing this. What a perfect figure. This face is all apex level. If you can enjoy it, it will be a blessing, Shen Menjiu said with an arrogant smile. The smile is very obscene. Completely living up to his calm personality before. Because he will have two personalities when he becomes a demon, and Black Mist did not explain this personality to him in detail. Personalities are arbitrary. Now Shen Menju has two personalities, one is unemotional and will be very calm-minded in every battle, and the other is very bloodthirsty and greedy. As if thinking of something, Shen Menjiu hugged Chu Yale and asked with a smile, I have a question that I am very confused about. Why can you control the power of law when you are only half of the Emperor realm? Hearing this, Chu Yale pursed her lips and said nothing. Her arrogant expression made people want to play with her. Shen Menju didn't pay attention and whispered in her ear, don't worry. As long as you tell me, I will let you go. I mean what I say. Chu Yale smiled coldly and stared at her with beautiful eyes, this kind of question is not something you can ask. Be careful, there will be a bloody disaster later. Shen Menju was indeed disdainful and said with an arrogant expression, who will take my life? Is it your so-called palace master? Ha 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 ha. I've always wanted to meet him. How strong is he? It seemed that he was aware of Shen Menju's words. I saw a terrifying aura coming within 100 miles. A strange black hole appeared in the sky full of dark clouds. Inside the black hole was a long dark river that could not be seen to the end, as if it could swallow people. I only heard the sound of extremely domineering footsteps coming from high in the sky. A mysterious man wearing a purple robe and a mask with a ghostly face stepped out. He stood with his hands behind his hands, his expression was arrogant, and his eyes hidden under the mask were almost indifferent. As soon as he appeared, the world seemed to be unable to bear his breath and shattered. Click, click, click. How brave are you? How dare you attack the people in my soul palace? Do you really think that you can fight with us after you gain some strength? A cold and emotionless voice appeared in Shen Menjiu's mind. The voice was as oppressive as a demon, which made him tremble and his expression gradually became serious. He threw Chu Yale aside casually and stared at this daoist figure. The figure stepped towards him from high in the sky. There was obviously no way in the air, but he walked down as usual. Steps appeared in the void, as if God was showing respect to him.